Alright, so these are my week 2 UFL power rankings. Let's get started. So starting off here, we have our top performances of the week. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I will talk about the quarterbacks mainly. Alex Magoo was not a great passer, but he was a great rusher with 84 rushing yards. Jordan Teamu had good counting stats, but he had bad completion percentage and had a turnover to go with it. Bryce Perkins was really solid. I wish he would have had more time. Denny Etling was okay in his time. EJ Perry was probably a little bit worse than Troy Williams there. Kellen Mond was okay, not great. Louis Perez was pretty good besides his one interception. Manny Wilkins surprised me a lot specifically. Anthony Brown was atrocious. And Nolan Henderson was pretty bad, but definitely better than Anthony Brown. But moving on from there, we got started off here at number 8, being the Houston Roughnecks. So they are 0-1, and they were number 8 a week ago. They also got absolutely destroyed, 31-6 by the St. Louis Battlehawks. They got outgained 460 yards to 170 yards. That's atrocious. 2 turnovers to 2 takeaways, right? The Houston Roughnecks played horrible. Anthony Brown at quarterback looked just flat out bad, right? Like really bad. 5 for 11 for like 20 yards and 2 interceptions is horrible. Nolan Henderson came in, did much better than Anthony Brown, although he was still pretty bad himself, like a 40% completion percentage, but at least he did get a touchdown there. He also had a pick, I believe, but well, no, I guess he didn't have a pick. He had a touchdown, and just very bad completion percentage. But definitely going into week 2, I think Nolan Henderson needs to be your starter just because of how bad Anthony Brown looked in week 1. Nolan Henderson did not look great by any means, but he looked miles better than Anthony Brown. Moving on here to the Memphis Showboats at number 7. They were number 6 just a week ago, but they are 0-1. They lost 26-12 versus the Michigan Panthers, although definitely looked better than that score. It was 20-12 going into the last possession of that game, where they ended up, throwing an interception, a pick 6, rather, to Kai Nakua. So definitely did not feel as bad as the final score shows. Another thing I want to note here is I do not want to completely overreact to just one game, because even looking at the NFL, right, through 2 weeks, the New Orleans Saints looked like one of the best teams of all time, and obviously that's not the case. So, sorry, but obviously the New Orleans Saints were not one of the best teams in the league, even though through 2 weeks they looked like it. So it is worth noting that this is just one game. I'm not trying to completely overreact to things, but in some cases I kind of am. But for the Showboats, Troy Williams looked better than EJ Perry in my opinion, so I would not be surprised if they go out and start Troy Williams. But I don't necessarily think EJ Perry looked bad enough that they need to bench him, but I don't necessarily like the 2 quarterback system. I think you kind of need to roll with one or the other, and if you were going to make that decision, I'd be rolling with Troy Williams. But moving on from there, we got the San Antonio Brahmas at number 6. You could definitely make an argument for them to be even lower here, below the Memphis Showboats, but because of who they played and of not trying to completely overreact to one bad game, right? It was a bad game from the San Antonio Brahmas, but there was some positives to speak of, right? They did get beat 33-9, right? That's not very good, but they only got outgained by like 100 yards, so not completely horrible. They did win the turnover battle, right? 0 turnovers offensively to 1 takeaway. Really, the big problem was, defensively, obviously not great. Offensively, offensive line was not great. But Kellen Mond didn't look horrible, right? He had a very low completion percentage and not the best yardage, but he didn't turn the ball over. He didn't make a ton of mistakes. So I feel like he didn't have a horrible UFL debut. So I think he's going to be able to build on that into week 2, which is why I have them ahead of the Showboats, because I do think Kellen Mond is going to build off of what he did in week 1. Whereas the Showboats quarterbacks, I feel like we've already kind of know what they're going to be. I don't think they're necessarily going to be much better than they were in week 1. But yeah, moving on from there, we have the Birmingham Stallions at number 5. They were obviously number 1 coming into the season, right? coming off of 3 straight championships, right? It's going to be very hard not to have this team ranked number 1. But, they have to fall down to number 5, right? They had a kind of a close game on the scoreboard, 18-11, right? But offensively, they were getting nothing done. Defensively, fine. They let up 18 points. Not really worried about their defense at all. But offensively, Alex McGough was very bad as a passer, right? He had 80-some yards rushing, and that was really good. But passing the ball, he had like 40% completion percentage for like 80 yards as well. He held on to the ball way too long, and they took 8 sacks. Their offensive line was horrible, yes, but some of those sacks could have been avoided if Alex McGough would have just thrown the ball away, right? Which definitely would have made this game go a lot smoother offensively. They had 138 total offensive yards. That is horrible. They let up almost 300 yards. They got outgained by over twice their yardage, which is obviously not good. They only had 1 turnover to 2 they had 2 turnovers to 1 takeaway. So not great there. You would have definitely liked them to not turn the ball over twice, obviously. But one thing I would say is Matt Corral would have done a way better job than Alex McGough as a passer. Alex McGough certainly showed his skills here in this game, which are having the ball in open space, which is why he's been a practice squad receiver the last 2 years in the NFL. So maybe I'm overreacting too much to one game, but certainly there's a world where Alex McGough comes out and actually ends up being a wide receiver for this team, just because he looked really good with the ball in open space, but he looked really bad as a passer. But moving on from there, we got the DC Defenders at number 4. They had the biggest surprise of the week, defensively having 8 sacks again against this Birmingham Stallions team was insane, right? They held them to 138 yards offensively, which was really insane. This is without their head coach, right? Reggie Barlow resigned, or basically resigned just a week ago. And they came out with a brand new head coach that took over a week before the season and absolutely dominated defensively against this Birmingham Stallions team. So, offensively, they didn't look great. 18 points isn't great. Jordan Tiamu looked fine, but not great, right? Kind of what I expected from this team offensively, but defensively, they were way better than expected, which is why they're going to come in here at number 4. Number 3 is going to be the St. Louis Battlehawks. They were 1-0, obviously, right? Dominated the Houston Roughnecks, but I don't want to overrate them because they did play the Houston Roughnecks, who are just quite frankly horrible as of right now, right? No offense to the Roughnecks, but I mean they suck. Just objectively, they suck. Outgaining them 460 to 170 yards is obviously great. Winning the turnover battle 2-0, obviously great. Manny Wilkins looked really good in this game, although they did not have a whole bunch of deep passes, which is why I'm kind of concerned offensively, because 90% of their offense this week was short passes, right, which is certainly helping Manny Wilkins' efficiency, and then running the ball. That's the wrong team, but Javion Howard and Jacob Sailors both had nearly 100 yards rushing, right? They were both amazing. And Manny Wilkins did not have a single touchdown pass. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. So the passing game looked really good, but they didn't really take any deep shots, right? Hakeem Butler did not get involved in this game at all. So until they can show that Manny Wilkins can throw deep passes consistently, I can't really rank this team any higher than they are right now. Number 2 is going to be the Arlington Renegades. So there's definitely a case for this team being number 1, and they did dominate, a San Antonio Brahmas team 33-9, which I didn't think necessarily was going to happen, right? But again, in the stat sheet, they only outgained it by like 100 yards, which isn't like utter domination. They lost the turnover battle 1-0, so even though they did win the game 33-9, there are still definitely some things that didn't stand out especially great in this game. Lou Perez was really good. Aside from that 1 interception, Kalen Ballard was really good. Davion Smith having 3 goal line touches for 3 yards and 3 touchdowns is certainly a stat line worth noting. But defensively, they were great. Offensively, they were great. It's just nothing was like completely excellent, right, throughout this game, which is that's the only issue I have with this Renegades team. Nothing looked like completely amazing, which is why I don't have it at number 1, but they definitely looked really, really good on both sides of the ball. Number 1 is going to be the Michigan Panthers. I had them at number 2 a week ago, right? And now moving up just 1 spot because they did end up winning 26-12. Now, They did not dominate this game either, but there were some things I really, really liked about this team. Obviously, holding a team to 12 points is amazing, right? Having 2 takeaways to 0 turnovers is really good. They only outgained them by 34 yards. That wasn't great. But also, they ran a 2 quarterback system here with Bryce Perkins and Danny Etling. Perkins did play the majority of the snaps, right? Probably 80% to Etling maybe getting like 20% of the touches, but I really think that Bryce Perkins needs to take over 100% of the reps, and I would expect him to probably do that in week 2 just because of how good he was in week 1. If Bryce Perkins is taking 100% of the snaps, this is the best offense in the league. He's the best quarterback in the league, honestly. If you take the 100% of the snaps, he's the best quarterback. This is the best offense. And defensively, they looked great in this game. So if that happens, they're definitely the best team in the league, in my opinion. But moving on from there, we have our standings here, which not much to really look at here. So you can just glance at that. But next up is going to be our quarterback power rankings. There's not really a whole lot to go over here, right? Bryce Perkins was amazing in limited time, right? He still split reps. Manny Wilkins was really good here as well. No turnovers, 2 rushing touchdowns, good efficiency. Louis Perez comes in at number 3. He probably would be number 2 if he did not throw that 1 interception. Jordan Talavio at number 4. He was fine, not great. He was fine. Troy Williams at number 5. He was pretty good. He had 1 interception there at the end of the game. Besides that, he was really good in limited snaps. Nolan Henderson in limited snaps was decent at least, but still nowhere near good. Alex Magoo was a great runner, but not a good quarterback. Kellen Mond was just fine all across the board, but definitely could have been better. Number 9 is AJ Perry. He wasn't horrible, but he was definitely worse than a Troy Williams, right? He wasn't great by any means. He wasn't really good by any means at all. Danny Etling didn't really have much reps. So I'm just going to put him at number 10, even though he was fine in his reps, right? If he had that exact same game that he had over a whole game, he'd probably come in at number 5 or 6 or something, but just because he really didn't get hardly any reps here, I'm only putting him at number 10. Max Duggan comes in at number 11, even though he did not throw a single pass this week. He had like 3 rushes for 12 yards. Those were his stats. I put him at number 11 ahead of Anthony Brown because Anthony Brown was that bad. Even though Max Duggan did not throw a single pass and really hardly played at all, he was still much better in this game than Anthony Brown was, right? Because Anthony Brown was just horrible. Now, next up is going to be our attendance. I'll get out of the way here, but the attendance for this week, right, these are important stats to look at. Like attendance and TV viewership are very important stats to look at when talking about the longevity that this league has. So looking at this, the Roughnecks Battlehawks game had only 7,000 fans. When looking at the Roughnecks home opener last year, it was up at 9,000. So definitely not good to see that the Roughnecks, who already had poor attendance, took a significant hit there at minus 2,000 from where they were home opener a year ago. The Renegades game against the San Antonio Brahmas. Their home opener last year had 14,000 fans. This year, they're all the way down to 10,000. 10,000 is a good benchmark number, but it's not good to see them be down 4,000 from where they were a year ago. Memphis Showboats. This one's really, really concerning, right? They were the worst attendance team a year ago. Their home opener had a little under 9,000. This home opener, only 4,300, less than half of last year's home opener. Very, very, very concerning for Memphis. If they continue to see half of the attendance they had a year ago, I would be very shocked if this Memphis Showboats team comes back for 2026 UFL. Then we have the DC Defenders, who had 15,000 a year ago and came at 12,000 this week. So definitely the highest of any teams this week, but still very, very concerning personally because this is a game against the Birmingham Stallions, who are the 3-time defending champions. I would have expected this team, or this game, to have closer to that 15,000 number again, but 12,000, not a bad number, just definitely worse than what I would have liked to see. Now, looking at the week 1 average across the board, it's about 8,500, whereas last year's week 1 average here was about 11,500. So 3,000 less than a year ago's average. Not a good look for the UFL as a whole. Moving on from there, we have our TV viewership, which very, very concerning numbers here as well. The season opener on Friday night between Houston and St. Louis had 690,000 viewers. Not good. The game wasn't close, right? Which could be part of the reason why the low viewership is there, but that's still a very concerning low number. Then we got the Brahmas and Renegades on Saturday on Fox at 584,000. Again, that game wasn't close, but you would still think that the game can draw more viewers than that. Now the Panthers and Showboats on Sunday on ESPN at 569,000. That game was fairly close for the majority of this game, and it still had really low viewership. Very concerning. And the Defenders and Stallions. That game was a one-score game the entire game, and it had less than 400,000 viewers. That is very, very, very concerning. TV viewership is going to be one of the main factors in the longevity of this league. And they had almost half of the viewership in week 1 from where they did a season ago. A season ago, week 1, they were at almost 1.05 million. This year, they're at 550,000 average viewership. That is horrible. Their lowest viewership in week 1 a year ago was 703,000 viewers. Their highest didn't even reach that mark this year in week 1. Very, very, very concerning for the longevity of this league. I really hope we can see some better numbers in week 2, but if we continue to see this poor viewership throughout the entirety of this season, we could be in serious jeopardy of losing the UFL as a whole before 2026 even happens. But that is going to be it for the video. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are on this video, and who do you think is going to win the UFL championship after week 1.